Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 8 of our middle school and high school literacy teacher professional development series. This session focuses on building reading comprehension through the use of graphic organizers, and it's actually the fourth session that we're talking about regarding reading comprehension. So just to recap our last session, we talked about applying the process of teaching writing with the purpose of improving reading comprehension. We said that if students are not just given the text, but given the text with the intent to write about the text after, that it improves reading comprehension. As students are given more opportunities to write, this also improves reading comprehension as long as we model explicitly what the expectation is and how to conduct that writing. It'll help focus them and develop their reading comprehension skills. Today's objective is that by the end of the session, you'll be able to implement graphic organizers in content area classes with the intent to improve reading comprehension. And graphic organizers, I know, are not something that's super new or something that you're probably not already using in class. However, if we use them as intended, and there's some different teacher moves that I want to talk about today, then they serve the purpose to improve reading comprehension. Let's dive into that. Just to refresh our memories with Scarbo's reading rope, we're really focusing specifically in these last 4 sessions, especially in the language comprehension, the upper part of the rope. And language comprehension, we said, includes both that oral language, but also the written language as well. And so we're using these graphic organizers today to develop our background knowledge, to process what's in the text, and to build our background knowledge. The vocabulary can also be built and highlighted through the use of graphic organizers, as well as the other language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge, depending on the graphic organizer that you choose to use. So, and the impact of graphic organizers on reading comprehension is there's a huge impact. It's very large. So Shanahan says that graphic organizers can also enhance reading comprehension by helping students to categorize information and to show the relationships among important concepts. So the graphic organizer, it's important when we're using the graphic organizer, I reference teacher moves, not just to give them the graphic organizer, but to help the students understand that the graphic organizer is actually a thought process. It's helping them break down and chunk the material into some kind of thought process and thinking, and helping the students to transfer that to their own thinking eventually as they become more proficient with the graphic organizer. There are various functions of graphic organizers. In reading comprehension. They assist learners to clarify and organize information into categories. And this can be a graphic organizer on main idea, supporting details, topic, sentences, facts, opinions. There's just a ton. And I have quite a few examples of graphic organizers in our presentation today. They can help organize information in a paragraph for better understanding. It helps students to understand that paragraphs are kind of thought bubbles. Each paragraph has its own idea bubble around it. It helps construct meaning of difficult words and sentences, dividing intellexias. It helps understand the context by associating with prior knowledge. So maybe we have a graphic organizer that asks them to list some prior knowledge and to make connections to the new material they're reading today. Identify conceptual and perceptual errors that may occur in the course of a reading passage. So if we know that there is a huge conceptual piece in the passage that they're reading today, but we have that structured out in our graphic organizer, we're kind of planning for it. It's a scaffold to help them break apart their thinking and to really understand the concept or maybe a perceived error. It helps to establish a purpose for reading. Anytime a student reads, they need to understand the purpose for reading that day. And so a lot of times there's a dual purpose. The purpose may be to understand, is always to understand what they're reading, but we're also usually asking them to make some kind of connection with it after. In today's example, I'm going to be asking students, and you're going to be my students, we're going to ask to make the connection between causes and effects of World War II on women. So I want them to understand the content of this happened and then this happened, but I also want them to have that layering of thinking with causes and effects as well. The graphic organizer helps with that. It also helps to chunk the material into smaller units. So when you're especially serving diverse learner populations, chunking the material, whether it's an English language learner or a student with a IEP or a 504 plan, this is essential to helping them to understand is to chunk that material. Implementing graphic organizers. So first thing you do is you want to determine what the purpose is for reading today. And in our example in a second, the purpose for reading is going to be to identify causes and effects. Then you want to determine what essential information you want students to pull from the text. So I'm going to ask students to focus on the social and economic impacts World War II had on women. Your essential information may be to pull how the process affected the phenomena if you're in science, or maybe you're in English language arts and you want them to extract the theme. But you need to understand the purpose for reading and what essential information you want them to extract before you even get into the graphic organizer. Then you want to model your expectations for exactly how the graphic organizer should be filled out. You want the students to be very clear. How many points do you want in each bubble? Can it be just jotted notes? Does it need to be complete sentences? It should be very clear what your expectations are when you release them to finish filling out the graphic organizer. You want to instruct students to fill out the graphic organizer as they are reading or after as a summarizing technique in order to support reading comprehension. So I talked about pairing these graphic organizers with enhancing reading comprehension. If we want them to serve the purpose of enhancing reading comprehension, we need the students to fill them out as they go so they can understand that helps you to comprehend what you're reading better as you're filling it out. You're processing the information as you're reading it. Inform students on why they are using the graphic organizer and what it will help with. So today, the purpose for filling out the graphic organizer is to help them extract causes and effects. And this is going to help you identify what a cause is in later readings and later texts and what the effects are by understanding the process of how we fill this out. Explain to students how to transfer the thought process of the graphic organizer so that it becomes internalized once they are proficient with using it. So cause and effect is a common theme in social studies as well as in other content areas. But say we use the graphic organizer 2, 3, maybe 4 times, and I notice that it's becoming easier for my students to fill it out. I can just tell them, okay, guys, we're not going to use the graphic organizer today, but I want you to use the same thought process you did when filling it out to jot down some notes. Or maybe I'm still offering it as a scaffold to my diverse learners, and the students who don't need it aren't using it anymore. Because the intent is not for them to always use a graphic organizer. It's to provide that scaffolding in the thought process until they don't need it anymore. So this has been in the last 3 sessions as well, but it's the same with this strategy as well. You want to select carefully the text to use when first beginning to teach a given strategy. So graphic organizers in and of themselves are not super complex. You should be able to just dive into the tier 1 and use the text that they're using there to process, unless you feel that you need to first build that background knowledge. Maybe you have another scaffold for different students and you need a lower level text before you jump into the tier 1 text. And you could do it that way as well. Show students how to apply the strategy they are learning to different texts, not just to one text. So I referenced earlier, as we use the cause and effect graphic organizer, this doesn't work for just this one text. It works for any text that we're talking about causes and effects for. Ensure that the text is appropriate for the reading level of the students. I referenced that in step 1. Use direct and explicit instruction for teaching students how to use the strategy. So I don't just hand them the graphic organizer and hand them the piece of text. I need to first model for them how I found the first cause, how I found the first effect. What was my thought process in identifying those? How did I know that was the most essential information? Once they have that, then I can release them to go and do some more on their own. And of course, use your pulse of your class to decide how much scaffolding you need there. If they've done the cause and effect graphic organizer before, and if the entire class is proficient, you don't have to provide direct and explicit instruction anymore, or maybe the majority of the class is proficient, and you just need to work with 2 or 3 students on a little bit more scaffolding before you release them. Number 5, provide the appropriate amount of guided practice depending on the difficulty level of the strategies that the students are learning. So we talked about the fact that graphic organizers aren't super difficult necessarily, but again, use the pulse of your class and determine how much scaffolding or guided practice is needed. So maybe there's 4 paragraphs. I model one explicitly. I release them for guided practice on one. I noticed that by that time they're successful identifying things as a whole class, I release them, but use that pulse. Number 6, when teaching comprehension strategies, make sure students understand that the goal is to understand the content of the text. So class, I don't want you just to understand causes and effects. I want you to understand what the intent of the passage is too. So when we talk about direct and explicit instruction, what does that look like? So first, you want to inform students of what strategy they will learn and why it's important. It's really important in grades 6 through 12, especially, that they understand why this is important. In order for them to retain the information, to keep using the strategy, they have to know where it fits and why it's important. You want to model the use of the strategy with a think aloud while interacting with the text. They should see the text. You should have the text up either on a Promethean, an Elmo, whatever the case is, to where the whole class can see the text. They can hear you talking out your thought process. Maybe you're annotating on the document before you transfer to the graphic organizer, but they need to see your thinking. And I say see your thinking because like I said, with your annotations or with your notes. And then provide guided practice with feedback. Yes, you identified the correct cause because it connects here, or no, that might not be the best cause. Let's look here instead. Or what other questions could you ask yourself to find the cause? And then provide independent practice with different types of text as well. So where do you find these graphic organizers? The best place to start is within your curriculum. A lot of curricula have graphic organizers already embedded. A lot of science curriculum do, ELA curriculum, social studies curriculum have a ton of graphic organizers in them. And then another great resource that I have found is Achieve the Core. These are all the different ones that are offered. It's a live link that you can click on, and we're going to be using the compare and contrast one today from Achieve the Core. You can also feel free to customize your own graphic organizers. So maybe the purpose that you're defining that day for reading isn't one of these. So you could go ahead and create your own. And then just as a note, and I'm going to talk about this in the model in a second, but consider scaffolding within the graphic organizer as well to meet the needs of your diverse learners. So maybe you have some sentence stems already pre-plugged into your graphic organizer for them. Or maybe you have some little pre-noted bullet points and put paragraph 1 next to 1 or paragraph 3 next to 1. So you're helping to chunk the text and redirect where they're pulling the information from. Let's jump into this and see what it looks like. All right, so I'm using a text from, one second. I'm using a graphic organizer, like I said, from Achieve the Core, and I've kind of plugged it into Canvas just so I can annotate. We're going to assume that this is either my live classroom or I'm teaching online and annotating as I go. And then here's my source. It comes from Khan Academy, and specifically today, we're focusing on the social and economic impact of World War II on women. Okay, so I'm talking with my class. Class, today we're going to talk about causes and effects. And we have a graphic organizer to help us to label and tag our thinking today. And you're able to use this on different types of text, not just on today's text. A lot of things have effects on other things. So we have World War II, and World War II caused some different things. Let's go to our text and see some things that it caused. So I also want to point out that when we're reading an informational text, one of the text features that really help us to focus are subtitles or subsections of the text. So this subsection that we're focusing on today is the challenges of wartime work. Okay, so I'm noticing that there's some challenges. Who was working during work? We're talking about women working today during World War II. So let's go ahead and put that as a cause. World War II happened. It caused women to go into the workforce. Okay, so we can go ahead and put that on our graphic organizer. Women entered the workforce during World War II. And today we're going to focus on 2 paragraphs, and I want you to pull out an effect of each. What was the effect of women entering the workforce? What happened as a result of these women entering the workforce? Okay, so let's dive in. I'm going to do the first one for you, and then you're going to do the second one. We're going to do it as a class. Okay, so paragraph 1, working women, especially mothers, faced great challenges during World War II. To try to address the dual role of women as workers and mothers, Eleanor Roosevelt urged her husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to approve the first U.S. government child care facilities under the Community Facilities Act of 1942. Eventually, 7 centers servicing 105,000 children were built. The First Lady also urged industry leaders to build model childcare facilities for their workers. Still, these efforts did not meet the full need for childcare for working mothers. Okay, so when I'm asking myself what was the effect for women entering the workforce in this paragraph, I'm noticing that a lot of this is focused on childcare and women having an option for childcare and how to care for their children since they're now working. So I know one of the effects is that. So let's find out what the main one is. What happened as a result of them needing childcare? What was the effect? Well, the effect was that Eleanor Roosevelt helped to pass the Community Facilities Act of 1942 to help with childcare. Okay, so I'm going to go to my graphic organizer and I'm going to add a little text box right here. Make sure I get this right. The Community Facilities Act of 1942. To help with childcare. Okay, so that was one. So now we're going to look at paragraph 2, okay, and we're going to do this as a class. And remember, we've already identified that the cause was that women entered the workforce. We're trying to figure out, besides just having childcare acts passed, what else happened as a result? What was another effect or impact on women from World War II? Okay, so there were also some cultural resistance to women going to work in such male-dominated environments. In order to recruit women for factory jobs, the government created a propaganda campaign centered on a figure known as Rosie the Riveter. Rosie was tough yet feminine. To reassure men that the demands of war would not make women too masculine, some factories gave female employees lessons in how to apply makeup and cosmetics were never rationed during the war. Keeping American women looking their best was believed to be important for morale. Who are we to say otherwise? Okay, so class, let's think about the fact that women went into the workforce. What was another effect or another impact? What is this paragraph mostly about? And so now I'd elicit answers from the whole class, or if you think you need another layer of scaffolding, you can allow them some think time. You should allow think time anyway, but you should allow them maybe to turn and talk before we do a whole class share if you need that level of scaffolding and thinking. And so hopefully they would come up with the fact that the government created a propaganda campaign centered around Rosie the Riveter to help females feel like they could do the work too and still be feminine. Okay, so then we would go ahead and fill that into our graphic organizer. Once again, if you think you need other scaffolds for your diverse learners, feel free to put some sentence stems here, or like I said, put paragraph 1. If we were using the whole source, right? If I'm teaching maybe a non-inclusion class, or maybe I even have honors class, I would give them the entire passage and say, okay, maybe fill out as many effects as you can based on this in that top box. Maybe put 3 bullets in the top box, and we'll look at another section, women in war after. So that's different ways to offer differentiation and scaffolding to your class, depending on who it is that you're teaching. So now I want to remind my class that we use the graphic organizer for causes and effects today, but you can use this graphic organizer, like we said, with other texts as you go. If you're thinking through and you're like, okay, I see lots of effects as I'm reading this informational text, then you can go ahead and use us for other texts as well. As we go, we may not need this graphic organizer anymore, class. You're going to start to think about these causes and effects, and they'll just fall into natural progression maybe of your paragraph. Let's jump back into our PD. So that was just an example of how you use direct instruction with your class to fill out the graphic organizers to enhance reading comprehension. All right. So just some final thoughts. Although the use of graphic organizers is widely known and used, they are not always used as intended. Like I said, sometimes we just hand out a worksheet. We assume that the students know exactly how to fill it out. We assume that they're extracting the most important information. We assume they know why they're even using the graphic organizer. So teachers should explicitly model how to fill out the graphic organizer, including their expectations and the thought process, so they can duplicate it later. Students should understand how to transfer the thought process of the graphic organizer and internalize it. Like I said, the intent is never to use the graphic organizer forever, for infinity. It's to help students internalize this thought process. So I want you to consider what ideas or topics are important in the upcoming unit you have coming up. What text will be used in the curriculum to help students develop their understanding of that topic? So for this example today, like we said, we had the women in World War II. I knew that was my text. What essential information needs to be extracted? I knew that I wanted them to extract the the effects, the social and economic effects of that. So I want you to think about what text are you going to use? What essential information needs to be extracted? What graphic organizer pairs best with the text? So if there's one with your curriculum, great. If there isn't one with your curriculum, feel free to use any one of these. What needs to be explicitly modeled for the students to use it? So I modeled for you today how to extract an effect. What needs to be modeled for your students? How will you help the process of the graphic organizer transfer to students? How will you help them do that? So these are just some things to think about as you implement graphic organizers with the intent to build reading comprehension. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please contact us at louisianaliteracy@la.gov. This kind of concludes our middle school and high school series as is, but I'm always looking for things in the field of what you need more sessions on, and we will have many more sessions at Teacher Leader Summit. So stay tuned, and thank y'all so much for tuning in.